The radical. Fundamental principles of freedom, rational self-interest, and individual rights. This is the Yaron Brook Show.
All right, everybody, welcome to Yaron Brook Show on this Saturday, December 20th. Thanks for joining me. We are, I told you that I'll devote my Saturday shows to three general topics, kind of Christianity and civilization, the search for meaning, and capitalism, just different aspects of capitalism. So today, we're back to the topic of civilization and Christianity, and we'll keep on this rotation. I do not have any reviews today, but I do need to catch up on those. So we'll probably devote a midweek show sometime to at least catch up on reviews and get them all done, and get them all or most of them done by year end. All right, let's see. So I thought we talked today about Christian values and what they are, and then how they relate to Western civilization, to civilization, to where we are today, to how we got to where we are today, how civilization came about, and to what extent we can attribute civilization to these co-Christian values. To what extent is Christianity responsible? But we'll look at it through the lens of Christian values, through the lens of Christian morality. I want to say one thing. I was thinking of calling this Judo-Christian values versus civilization. But then I thought, God, then I'd have to separate out what is exactly, I'd have to do the whole theology of the separation between Christianity and Judaism. And that seems ridiculous. Also, it just opens it up to the argument of, no, there is no Judeo-Christian. It's really only Christian values, and Jewish values are very different, and to some extent that's true. So I decided to hell with it. I mean, the reality is, Judeo-Christian values, the whole idea of Judeo-Christian civilization, Judeo-Christian whatever, is probably a mid-20th century concept. It is a post-Holocaust concept. It's a way for Christians to pretend that Christianity had nothing to do with the Holocaust. For Christians to pretend that, oh no, we've always been on the Jews' side. When faced with the reality of what happened in Europe during World War II. So there is no such thing as Judeo-Christian values. The Jews and the Christians indeed disagree on many of these values. They share common, as we'll see, we won't see, but they'll share common irrationality, the irrationality of religion, the irrationality of faith that they share, but they disagree on the particulars, and there's no point in really getting into it. Just to be clear, just so nobody has any doubts, because I know a lot of people are out to get me on this issue. It's Judeo. Who cares? Judo is a martial art. I'm talking about judo. You thought I was talking about Jews. No, I'm talking about Judo-Christian. There's a Judo-Christian thing. Judeo-Christian. Just so we're clear, I don't think Jewish values had anything to do with civilization either. So everything I say criticizing Christianity, with some variations because the values are different, but basically applies to Judaism. But why don't I, and this is a question I get all the time, right? Why don't I attack the Jewish religion and Judeo values as much as I attack Christian values? Primarily because they're just mostly in America, in Western civilization, arguably even in Israel, they're not that relevant. We live in a world in which the relevant values, the relevant perception of morality, the relevant religion is Christianity. Judaism is an asterisk. It's barely significant. There are, 15 million Jews in the world. It doesn't count for anything. And many of those Jews, if not most of those Jews, are completely secular and if they have any values, if they've absorbed any values, they've absorbed it from the Christian culture around them. And indeed, arguably, Judaism has been Christianized quite a bit in the last few hundred years. So it's just a waste of time to criticize Judaism. Now, if I lived in Israel, where Judaism is to a large extent a threat, qua religion, is a threat to, I think, the existence of the state of Israel, to the success of the state of Israel, to the the civilized aspect of Israeli society, then I'd spend a lot of time in Israel criticizing Jewish values. But I live in America, and my audience is overwhelmingly, overwhelmingly not Israeli. It's overwhelmingly American and Canadian, Australian, and European. It's Anglo-Saxon and European, and a small fraction Israeli. So why would I spend time talking about Jewish values when it's not relevant to the challenges and struggles that we are facing in America, the cultural issues that we face, and indeed to the very evolution of Western civilization. Western civilization evolved in the context of Christianity. That's a reality. It didn't evolve in the context of Judaism. It didn't evolve in the context of this particular version of the context of Islam, although Islam played a much bigger role. Muslims, not Islam. Muslims played a much bigger role, arguably, certainly in the push of civilizing the West than Jews did, because they were the transmitters. They were the people who transmitted the knowledge of the Greeks to the West. Not Jews. Muslims did that. So, religion sucks, and across the board, and I'm not biased towards Judaism. We could have a discussion about the relative virtues and vices of Christianity versus Judaism, and which version of Christianity, which version of Judaism, and so on. We could have that discussion. It could be an interesting discussion. Which one is worse, Christianity or Judaism? But that's not that important. It's not that interesting from the perspective of, I reject them both. From the perspective of the rejection of religion completely. All right. Just a few other things. Somebody says the golden age of Islam. Yes, I read a book. I told you about this. I read a book about Central Asia, Islam in Central Asia, and the golden age, the Enlightenment in Central Asia in the 9th to 11th century. And it was amazing. That was a really incredible book. And I'm reading a book now about Spain, basically, during the Middle Ages. That is the Islamic conquest of Spain, and then the erosion of that, and what happened there. Not as good of a book, too engaged in the politics of it. This king did that, and rather than in the intellectual. It's not now. Granted, the book is focused differently. It's not focused on Enlightenment. It's not focused, but it still emphasizes the extent to which the fact that Christians were welcomed into Islamic Spain, into Andalusia, the south of Spain, which was Muslim for a very long time, and were allowed into the libraries, and therefore copied and translated the writings of the great Greek philosophers, and also the Asian Islamic Enlightenment was also being translated. And then, of course, there was Averroes, the great Muslim philosopher in Spain, who was Aristotelian, who was translated into Latin. That is what set off the intellectual revolution that made that led to the Renaissance, that led to Western civilization. So you cannot understand Western civilization. You cannot understand the rise of Aristotelian ideas, even the creation of universities in Europe, without an understanding of what they were reading, what was being translated, what was being transmitted into Europe from the Muslim world during this period, primarily from Spain, primarily from the libraries in places like Cordoba and later, Toledo in further north. Toledo, which was occupied by the Christians pretty early, and immediately they started translating everything and moving it out. So, yeah, I mean, Andalusia was no paradise. So Godside recommended The Myth of Andalusian Paradise 1 week ago. I don't know if that's the book I'm reading, but I'm reading a book that basically says, yeah, it was no paradise. And it certainly was no paradise, and I don't even know what you mean by paradise. They were all killing each other constantly and raping and murdering and fighting and infighting, and they were all in on it. The Christians, the Muslims, the Jews, they were all scheming, and politically it was a complete disaster. And there was no stability, and there really was no period of paradise. But there were periods of great achievement, not so much in the sciences, but philosophy. You get Maimonides and Avicenna. No, Avicenna is in Asia. Averroes and Maimonides, and in poetry and in other culture. Culturally, it thrived, while politically it was just a complete and utter disaster. And it was never a paradise in the sense that everybody was constantly discriminating against everybody. It wasn't. Everybody again was slaughtering everybody. So Averroes. All right. So I want to say that's also relevant to our discussion of where civilization comes from and how it evolves, and relevant to the discussion about Christianity. But I just want to fill you in kind of on the books that I am reading. God, where's my phone? Oh, I didn't bring my phone into the office. Okay, that is fine. I want to say something else. No, I think that's all I wanted to say, as in a sense a backup. Introduction, or wasn't even really an introduction. But okay, let's jump in. Let's talk about Christian values, and we'll talk about the relation between Christian values and civilization. And let's be clear here what I mean by civilization. What I mean by civilization is a culture of achievement. It's a society. A civilized society is a society where you see great achievements in human life. That is, in the arts, in architecture, in sciences, in the advancement of human well-being. Civilization, in a sense, is a relative term because it's contextual to the period it was in. We talked about this last time when we talked about civilization, right? Egypt was a civilization when it was a civilization. If you took that civilization and planted it in today, it would be barbaric. It would be primitive, barbaric, and completely uncivilized. But in the context of its time, it provided stability. It provided a legal system. It provided some, human achievement, pyramids, some dabbling in primitive science, particularly astronomy, and some arts in Egyptian sculpture and things like that. Right. So it's relative to the time. Greece is exceptional in the sense that much of that civilization would be civilized in any period, except for the fact that Greeks had slaves and viewed slavery positively as a positive feature, with some exceptions, or some Greek thinkers who condemned slavery. Greeks treated women, awfully. Democracy or political participation was very, very limited. So it was civilized in some respects, even today, but for its time, it's a civilization. It's a great civilization. It's one of the great civilizations ever. because it has features, Greece, that impacted all civilization following it, and indeed would be considered civilized even today. So, civilization is this thread that goes through history. Maybe it starts in Mesopotamia, Egypt, Babylon and Persia, Greece, Rome, Central Asia, to some extent, Andalusia, Baghdad, southern Spain, and then I think comes to Europe as a civilizing force, and Europe becomes civilized at some point. But it's not civilized. There's no Western civilization, I'd certainly say before the Renaissance, and really no civilization in the sense of the achievements of the modern world before the Enlightenment. So there's no. There is a Mayan civilization. There is American civilizations pre-Europeans arriving here. Those civilizations are civilized only in the context of the place and the time, but not in time, because there were already much more dramatic achievements in other places, given the time. But given the place, they were improvements, and compared to the culture surrounding them, they were improvements. The Mayan civilization, the Aztec civilization, and so on. And of course, there was Chinese civilization, Indian civilization, who were kind of parallel civilizations that, in many respects, got stuck and never really advanced into the modern world. Never really took the next step, beyond an organized society with the rule of law and a government. At least laws and a government and a declining violence and some technological and material achievements. Right? It got stuck. Those material achievements got stuck. They never made political achievements. Their philosophical achievements got stuck. Confucius, and there were a few others, but a philosophical culture doesn't evolve like it does in Greece and then ultimately in Europe. So what we have. So that's how I consider civilization. That's what I consider civilization. And then the question is civilization? Can we see a causal relationship between civilization and the Christian values? And so think about it this way. Can we see a relationship between the political achievements of the Founding Fathers and Christian values? Can we see a relationship between the aesthetic achievements of the Renaissance and Christian values? Can you see a relationship between the incredible scientific achievements of the Renaissance through the age of science and the age of reason and into the modern world through Christian values? Can we see the material advancement that happens starting, sometime in the late 18th century through the Industrial Revolution, through the 20th century? Can we find those? Do those have a root in Christian values? Can we see the relative decline in violence that happens certainly starting in the early 19th century to date, in spite of the two world wars? Can we see the decline in violence during a certain period in Western civilization as anchored in Christian values? That's the project. That's what I want to talk about today. We can't cover the whole topic. We'll take on a few elements, and maybe we'll talk about this again sometime in the future. A reminder to feel free to ask questions about this or anything else, but it would be particularly interesting if you ask questions about this topic or generally about civilization, about history, the history of civilization, and all of that. That would be the most interesting and I think useful if you could do that. So we've got one question so far, but it's a $50 one, so that's cool. And of course, you could support the show with stickers. All right. Now, in order to figure out what Christian values are, this is important. I turned to my basically companion theologian, the in-house, if you will, my in-house theologian, to ask about what are core Christian values. And in my household, the in-house theologian is ChatGPT 5.2. That is where I get my theological advice from. Now, I know for some this will not be very satisfying. They would rather I had a actual theologian here, but alas, I do not know any. And I've discovered that ChatGPT does a really decent job. Like, if you ask ChatGPT about Ayn Rand, which I do, Ayn Rand's view of this, Ayn Rand's view of that, it does a really good job of summarizing a philosophy, of addressing it. Now, it's wrong on some things, and there's some nuances that are wrong, and it's a little skeptical of objectivism. But generally, it's pretty damn good. Now, I don't have Grok, although I guess I could use it through Twitter, but I think ChatGPT seems to be quite good. Again, my measure of quite good is asking about something that I know. And I know objectivism, so I asked it about objectivism, and it does it quite well. Jason says Mormons will cook you dinner. Yeah, but would I want to eat it? I don't know. Mormon food does not strike me as appetizing. I apologize to any Mormons out there who might be great chefs, but just generic Mormon food is not my thing. People are saying, Grok is more straightforward. I wonder if I asked Grok about core Christian values, whether I'd get a different answer significantly. The same with Gemini. Anyway, here we are. These are the core Christian values. It's got 10. I get they're associated with the 10 Commandments, and it's separating from the 10 Commandments. I give it credit for not just giving me the 10 Commandments. Indeed, none of these are in the 10 Commandments explicitly. Number one, love, charity, love and charity. So, love God and love your neighbor as yourself. This includes compassion, self-sacrifice, and concern for the vulnerable. Okay, so love, not so much as an emotion, but as a kind of a as an action, as a guide to action. Faith, love, faith, trusting God, commitment to His teachings. This is about reliance on God, loyalty to God, and this is where important truths come from. It's faith. The most important truths come from. 3, humility, recognition of human limitations and dependence on God, rejects pride and self-exaltation. The last shall be first. The last should be first. Forgiveness. Forgiving others as God forgives, and I find this weird. Forgiving others as God forgives. God is unbelievably unforgiving. Now, everybody tells me that that's true of the Old Testament God, but the New Testament God is a very loving God and is a very forgiving God. Only if you follow His dictates to the letter, and even then it's not clear, right? I mean, in the day of judgment, I go to hell. I mean, where's forgiveness? Like, okay, I've sinned here and there, but, where's the forgiveness to me? No, you go to hell. Because why? Because you were born Jewish and you're an atheist. You go to hell. Tell what you actually did in life. Hell is for you. I don't know. Forgiveness, I don't see that. Turn the other cheek. Turn the other cheek. Christians are very good at turning the other cheek. Justice, which is moral righteousness and care for the poor, oppressed, and marginalized. Mercy, it's often paired with mercy. Justice and mercy are related, right? And then another use of mercy is mercy and compassion. This is number 6, I guess. Showing kindness, and again, Some of these are repetitive, ultimately, because, as we'll see, honesty and integrity, truthfulness in word and action, and living consistently with one's moral commitments, self-sacrifice, willingness to give up personal comfort for others. I like the way ChatGPT puts it, personal comfort. That's self-sacrifice. Jesus gave up personal comfort to be put on a cross and nailed to it and suffer an agonizing, slow death. I mean, that's a whitewashing of self-sacrifice. How about willingness to give up your life, to give up your values, to give up what makes you happy, to give up what's yours for others? And then it says the second bullet point is modeled on Christ's life and crucifixion. But the whole point of the crucifixion is it wasn't just giving up a personal comfort. It was a lot more than that. All right, maybe I'll try Grok. Maybe Grok won't sneak in personal comfort kind of stuff in there. Obedience to God. Obedience to God, which I think is part of faith. Aligning one's life with God's will as revealed in the scripture and conscience. And then finally, hope. Confidence in salvation, although most of you are not going to get salvation. You're not going to get salvation. And if you believe in Augustine, before you were born, God already decided whether you were saved or not. So forget it. Resurrection and eternal life. So hope. All right. So here's the thing. I mean, basically, what does this all boil down to? It boils down to faith. It boils down to faith. And under faith, you can put in obedience to God and really hope. If hope is confidence in salvation, resurrection, eternal life, those are all based purely on faith. Providing meaning in suffering and adversity, that's all faith. The faith that there is something. So I would say, one is hope. One is faith. Faith captures much of this, right? A second is self-sacrifice. Self-sacrifice includes justice and mercy and forgiveness. They're all captured under self-sacrifice, right? Self-sacrifice, justice, mercy, and forgiveness. So that's two. We got faith, which captures hope, obedience to God, and faith, and we've got self-sacrifice. And what's the third one? What's the third one? I mean, the third one would be, I think, humility. Humility. Which is, recognition of your own limitation. And I would say this is also connected with love, although love could be also related to self-sacrifice, because that's kind of the conception of love that they have. Their love is self-sacrificial. Their love is about compassion, about concern for the vulnerable, about loving your neighbor as yourself, whether this humility. Yeah, there's they throw in here two things like honesty and what is it? Honesty and integrity. Integrity. They have that in there. It's in the 10 Commandments. Thou shalt not lie as duties. But it doesn't. That is really so different than all the other ones, and you could add it, but I don't think it's significant. I think the three that I want to focus on really are faith, self-sacrifice, and humility. Faith, self-sacrifice, and humility. And the question is to what extent the faith, self-sacrifice, and humility encourage or discourage civilization. To what extent did they play a role, these Christian values, these essential, I think, Christian values that capture a lot of the other Christian values, to what extent did they really represent the striving towards and the achievements of civilization? Think of a civilization that is built on faith, self-sacrifice, and humility. I can't think of one. because I don't think that these are compatible with civilization. Indeed, if you think of an era in human history where faith, self-sacrifice, and humility were elevated above all else, were elevated as the values that should dominate human life and should dominate human organization, then if you think about a period like that, then you get the Dark Ages and maybe part of the Middle Ages. Jennifer says you get 1220 Europe. Yes, you get Europe, or you get, the Muslim world since its golden age. Faith. I mean, civilization depends on what? I mean, it depends on great achievements. It depends on human flourishing and human success at living, at creating the material possibilities for living and improving materially and benefiting materially. Human civilization depends on human creativity, things like arts and architecture and beyond that, science and technology. And they depend on being able to create political forms that facilitate the betterment of human life. Now, none of that comes from faith. There is no, the Renaissance artists did not figure out anatomy from faith. Indeed, the Christian church made it very, very, very difficult for the Michelangelos and the Leonardos and the great artists of the Renaissance to figure out anatomy, because they banned dissection. They made it illegal. They viewed it as a sin. Faith does not give you Michelangelo's David. It doesn't even give you it doesn't give you a Donatello's David. It doesn't give you a school of Athens. It doesn't give you a kind of the amazing. I mean, Leonardo da Vinci. It doesn't give you any of his paintings where where you can see kind of the careful detail of and emphasis on things like perspective, but then of course on expression, on emotion, on individuation, on the idea of individuating the particular people he's painting. None of that comes from faith. That it comes from studying human beings. It comes from scientific analysis. It comes from experimentation with colors. It comes from a mathematical, geometrical analysis of human perception, and as a consequence, the discovery of perception. It comes from the study of anatomy, even the anatomy of the human face, the muscles of the face, the musculature of the face. It comes from reason, from the application of rationality. Now, all these people might have been Christian, but in that they were doing things that led to civilization, in that they were enacting causes that led to the effect that was civilization, they were not acting on Christian values. They were acting on rational values. Rational values that they recognized either because of the introduction of rational values through Aristotle into the culture, within Christianity, or implicitly, or through their own realization. But they were pursuing, for example, the Renaissance. One of the things the Renaissance is really pursuing as a value, as an important value, is beauty. Beauty for its own sake, as a value. Now, even though the Christian church in that period is doing the same thing, it is pursuing beauty. But that's not a Christian value. That is a pagan value. That is a value they've taken from the Greeks. The cathedrals are not meant to be beautiful. Indeed, the cathedrals are stark. The cathedrals have gargoyles on them. The cathedrals have sharp edges. There's so much about making you look small, making you look insignificant as compared to the majesty and grandeur of God. It is the discovery of Greek and Roman art and the introduction of even architecturally. Compare Renaissance architecture to these ugly cathedrals, and you can see a different. There's a certain harmony that is being sought in the Renaissance. There's a certain sense of beauty. There's edges. There's a lot more rounding of things. They're domes rather than spires. There's a lot more seeking beauty and harmony. Beauty is a value. It's a value in human life. But it's a secular value that is then used by the church, because the church wants to embrace lots of secular values. It wants to make science its own. It wants to make beauty its own. It wants to make art its own. For political reasons, for power reasons, right? I mean, why do the popes make St. Peter so amazing and beautiful and grand, and they hire the best artists anyway? Is this because they're following scripture, or is it because they want to show the world how rich and successful they are? They want to show the world, the power that they have, and they also want to entice people to come to church. So church has beautiful music, and it has great paintings on the wall, and so on. So it's for the church, beauty is not an end in any kind of sense, and it's not to enhance human life. It's to project power and to entice people in. It's used for the purpose of the church, but it doesn't come from the church. Again, when the church dominates, you get gargoyles. If you get any attempt at aesthetics. Science. We've talked about this, and we'll talk about it many, many times, because I find this so damn condemning and so stunning. Particularly given the historians who want to rewrite history to pretend that the Dark Ages didn't exist. But science, when faith is at the forefront, then science does not advance. It does not succeed. That's why for 1,000 years there was just no science. I mean, really, there was no science in the West. From about 400 to about 1400. I mean, there was a little bit here and there, but nothing of substance. Not anything dramatic, and no culture of science, no civilization. So faith, is anti-science. It's the idea, and so this is not an accident. Faith is anti-science. It's the idea the truth comes from God, from revelation, not from observation, not from experimentation, but from revelation, or from an ancient book. And they were so, the Christians were so immersed in faith. Faith was such a dominant value to them that when they discovered Aristotle, and they had, they found him interesting and fascinating, they took so much of what he said on faith. So that Aristotle's scientific observations, which for the most part are wrong, they tried to defend as if it was scripture. Because their whole understanding was Aristotle couldn't be wrong. He was inspired by a revelation, by a holy whatever. They didn't understand the methodology that he was using, which was anti-faith, pro-reason. But anyway, it was faith is incompatible it's incompatible with the civilization of science and beauty and aesthetics and the creation of those aesthetics. So some other values had to be snuck in. Some other values had to enter in order to make the civilization happen. Those values of beauty from the pagan world, the value of reason from Aristotle, the value of logic from Aristotle, and then the actual scientific work that the Greeks had done and the Arabs had done, Asians, whatever, the Muslims had done, penetrating and people going, whoa, oh, you can do this stuff. It's not just the Greeks. Other people can do it. Maybe we can do it. But those ideas, the idea of reason and rationality and observation and the possibility of discovery, that is what makes civilization possible. Faith is an anti-civilizational force. And indeed, as those values are entering, the church is fighting them. They're fighting against Aristotle. They're fighting against science. And to some extent, in the early Renaissance, they're fighting against the artists. It's controversial what the artists are doing. So, faith, incompatible with civilization. Incompatible with civilization. I'm going to go to humility. We'll leave self-sacrifice to the end. Is humility compatible with civilization? Humility, the recognition of human limitation and dependence of God. I mean, really, where would we be without the arrogance of a Newton or a Galileo? I mean, you have to be pretty arrogant, self-confident, self-assertive to say to the world, you've all been wrong. You've all been damn wrong. I have the truth. I have discovered the truth. This is how the world works. And you guys are wrong. Humility? I mean, was Michelangelo Michelangelo was not humble. He could do with marble what he wanted to do with marble. And he knew it. And he knew he was the best. And he told people he was the best. And it's reflective in his work. He is pushing himself. He is striving. He's perfecting. He's not depending on God. He's not contemplating his limitations. I mean, and, you could argue that to the extent that he rejects pride, he suffers for it. The last should be first. What civilization was ever built by the last? By the meek, by the poor? By the way, if you want to ask a question or make a comment or challenge me on something, Super Chat is open. That's the way to do it. Don't just stick it in the chat if you want me to see it. So the comments today are hysterical. Oh my God. All right. The people who shoulder civilization, the people who build civilization, who create civilization, who have made the modern world, which even if you reject, you are massive beneficiaries of, are not guided by humility. They're guided by a passion to seek out the truth, to change the world, to create something beautiful. Civilization was created by men who reject the value of humility and embrace their own capacity for genius, their own capacity to shape the world, their own capacity to understand the world, free of faith, free of a reliance on a God, on mysticism. I mean, do humble men create the United States of America? No. These were men with supreme confidence and self-esteem. These are not men that were the last. These were the men who were first, of immense intelligence, of immense capabilities, and they knew it. They were actors in reality. They weren't guided by faith to establish America. They weren't guided by humility to establish America. They were guided by self-esteem, love for this world, love for freedom as individuals. As individuals. Again, they might have had, presented Christian ideals because that's the world in which they live and that's all they thought. I'm saying they acted against those ideals. Newton was deeply religious. Locke was, Michelangelo was. No, not so much. But they acted against that. I don't know exactly what Franklin meant by humility, but religious humility, recognition of his limitations and dependence on God and rejecting pride and self-exaltation, the last shall be first. That's not Franklin. That's not Benjamin Franklin, even if he wrote in his little book of virtues to be humble. This is not the humility. It's not Christian humility that he's talking about. Don't be boastful. We all can agree. Don't be boastful. Don't take credit for things you are not responsible for. Don't, lord over other people because of your success. There are lots of things that we can agree that might fall under something related to humility that Franklin might be talking about. But in terms of what it means in Christianity, no. No. And finally, self-sacrifice. Self-sacrifice fundamentally means the giving up of personal values, of your values, of values that you believe are necessary for your life, your happiness, for your success, for your flourishing, for the sake of others. Giving up a high value for nothing in return or something lower in return. Again, that is not civilization. It's not civilization building. Self-sacrifice is what you demand of people who go to war for you. It's what you demand of your serfs. It's what you demand of slaves. But self-sacrifice is not a morality of value seekers, of people who are, aggressively pursuing, passionately pursuing, aggressively and passionately pursuing their values, which is what you need to build a civilization and to sustain a civilization and maintain a civilization. You need the creation of values, human values. Values necessary for human life. A sacrifice would be to ask Michelangelo not to sculpt David. Because, I don't know, there was some charity work that needed to be done. He needed to go and feed people in the soup kitchen. None of the people who built Western civilization, who created the civilization, who created the achievements, right? The science, the art, the architecture, the political freedom, political liberty that characterizes modern civilization, those people didn't do it as an act of sacrifice. Even when the Founding Fathers signed the Declaration of Independence knowing that they're likely to be killed because they're likely to lose the war and the British will execute them, they don't view it as a sacrifice in a sense of giving up a higher value for a lower value. They view their freedom as a high value, a value they're willing to risk their lives for. Same goes for the soldiers who fight to protect civilization, defend civilization, sustain civilization. It's not a self-sacrifice. It's not about mercy and compassion and a willingness to give up stuff. And certainly, nobody's ever created civilization by modeling Christ's life. Christ's life is stagnation. It's not elevation. It's stagnation. It's not progress. The idea of human progress, the idea that we can achieve more, that is not a humble idea. That is not an idea based on faith. God doesn't promise that anyway. He promises salvation to some, but salvation has nothing to do with achieving material prosperity or beauty or anything else in this earth other than sacrifice. And sacrifice denies you the time, the energy, the focus, the ability to achieve great things. So there's no relationship between these Christian values and the civilized world and civilization. I mean, compassion, a good thing, but compassion doesn't build civilization. Mercy doesn't. Justice, in a sense of care for the poor and oppressed and marginalized. I mean, Founding Fathers, the Declaration of Independence doesn't talk about the poor, oppressed, and marginalized. It talks about individual rights. All men are equal in their rights, politically free as individuals. Forgiveness. I'm just looking at this. I mean, which of these? And I'm not even going to get to love because I think the definition of Christian love is absurd and ridiculous because it relies on self-sacrifice. We can talk another time about love. Jennifer says, compassion for whom? Compassion for the last. The last shall be first. So compassion for the suffering, compassion for the people who don't have, compassion for anybody except you. And of course, hope is entrepreneurs are not hopeful. They're doers. They go create the world that they want. They don't sit around hoping for it. They're not confident in their salvation. They go create. They go build. They go make. Again, entrepreneurs, you don't function on the basis of faith. I mean, confidence, belief based on evidence in your own ability and in the market and all that stuff, but not faith. And entrepreneurship is not about self-sacrifice. It's about working hard. It's about trade-offs. It's about giving up stuff. Indeed, faith, self-sacrifice, and humility are anti-civilizational values. And to the extent that they are taken seriously, we know what they lead to. In spite of the idea of love and forgiveness, I mean, did Charlemagne forgive those, were they Frankish? Well, I'm not even sure what they were, but the 4,500 soldiers who refused to convert to Christianity, who he slaughtered in one day. Was that an act of charity, forgiveness, love? What exactly was it? certainly an act of faith. He believed God had not commanded, but it entrusted him to do the right thing. Maybe viewed as an act of justice. When heretics were burnt at the stake for disagreeing about whether there was a Trinity or what the relationship in the Trinity between God and the Son, whether it was literally a son, whether they were co-equals, or whether they were all the same. Like, I mean, Catholic Church post what do you call it? Nicaea holds that it's a three that are one, right? So they don't believe in A is A. The Catholic Church does not believe A is A. They don't believe a thing is what it is. They believe three different things can be one thing. So three different gods can be one God. And if you disagreed about that, or on some minor implications of that, or minor explanation of that, you were burned at the stake. I mean, Calvin burnt somebody he was very friendly with and he actually respected because of a disagreement about the Trinity in Calvin's Geneva. But there was no tolerance for people who misinterpreted the Bible. There was only one interpretation, Calvin's in this case. And if you disagreed with it, it was it. You were burned at the stake. So Christianity, incompatible with civilization, incompatible with freedom. Now, I say incompatible. That is, to the extent that it is taken seriously, to the extent that it is embraced fully, it leads to the opposite. It leads to uncivilized. To the extent that it's just embraced at the margin, then yeah, civilization can still exist. Christianity is not adding to it, it's subtracting from it. And it's subtracting from human flourishing. But it can coexist, if you will. Reason and faith can coexist, even though the opposites and they're driving civilization in different directions, right? One uncivilized, one to civilize. And ultimately one has to win and one will lose. But again, to the extent that we are Christian, to the extent we take it seriously, to the extent that we're going to be consistent about it, to the extent that we pursue it, to that extent, we are driving ourselves, our culture, our world away from civilization, towards the barbarity, towards 1220 or 930 or 666. There you go. 666. That's a good number. So my conclusion, not surprising, I think, to anybody out there, is Christian values are incompatible with civilization. They hold civilization back. They undermine civilization, and to fully embrace the potential that is civilization, the potential that is freedom, the potential that is science, the potential that is beauty and aesthetics and art, the potential that is human achievement in any realm, the potential that is love, the potential that is human relationships. One needs to reject the Christian values. Now, it's not enough to reject them. You have to replace them. And you have to replace them with values anchored in reality, discovered through reason. We are a rational animal. To live as nature, in a sense, to live by our nature requires us to abandon faith in the name of reason, to abandon self-sacrifice in the name of our own thriving, in our own flourishing, and to abandon humility in the name of pride, a commitment to our own success, achievement, perfection. So, yes, Christianity, civilization, they don't mix. I mean, they mix, but the one is polluting the other. Christianity is polluting the element that is civilized. All right. Thank you, guys. Thanks for joining me. That was an hour. All right, we're good. Super chat is good. Thank you. I appreciate that. We're on a good track. A lot of questions. Whew. All right, I'll have to get through all of them. Let me remind you of a few things. Again, you can keep asking questions. That's great. If you don't want to ask questions, you can do stickers. December 31st, we'll be doing an extended show, review of 2025, and looking forward to 2026, from 1 p.m. East Coast time until, who knows, 4+ hours. We'll also make that a big fundraising push, a fundraising event. So please, if you're not a regular live listener, please consider coming live just to participate in the fundraising aspect of it. It'll also be fun and engaging, and we'll have some fun banter and back and forth. I might have some guests show up to take some of your questions. I'll try to let you know in advance once I know who's going to come. So that might also be installed. But generally, we'll try to make it fun and interesting, and there'll be the suspense of can we raise the money, which is always fun. If you'd like to contribute and don't want to use YouTube because it's limited by $500, or you just don't want to do it on YouTube, you can do it on PayPal. Just write in the notes of PayPal under Yaron Brook Show PayPal. Just write in the notes that it's for the New Year's Eve show, so I know to attribute that money for that show. All right. Let's see if there's anything else I wanted to mention before we jump into your questions. You know, we've got a bunch of sponsors. They're down there. You can find the links down there. I'll give them full credit next show. And yeah, Patreon. Don't forget to become a monthly supporter of the show on Patreon. If you're at the $10, you get the audio version of the podcast with no ads. Right? If you get it the normal way, you get it with ads. But if you do $10 on Patreon, you get a separate feed, still through Apple Podcast or whatever. But now you don't have any ads. Also, I didn't even know this, but it turns out that if you support the show on Patreon at $5 or above, you have access to all the members only shows. You can't watch it live because that technically YouTube doesn't allow me to do. You have to be a member on YouTube to watch them live. But you can watch them after the fact. You can watch all the shows, the members only shows after the fact on YouTube. I guess no, you can't watch them. You get a podcast version of them. So you get a podcast version of all the members only shows that you can listen to. So that's another perk that exists on Patreon beyond the regular perks. Those are unique to Patreon. So please consider becoming a monthly supporter as we enter into 2026. It'll be great to increase the number of people supporting on a monthly basis, and of course the dollar amount. All right, let me turn to your questions. Let's doing this. All right. Let's start with Andrew. $50. Thank you, Andrew. Advice for serious believers of Catholicism in their youth who now consider themselves objectivists. To avoid the rancid premise of suffering on earth as a supernatural value, one must first come to know that acknowledging one's pleasure is safe. Yes. Acknowledging one's pleasure is safe, and pleasure is good. Pleasure is to be enjoyed. Embrace pleasure. I mean, make sure it's not a sacrificial pleasure, that you're not giving up a higher value for it. But pleasure, qua pleasure, is good. It's a sign of life. It's a positive sign. So it's the knowledge pleasure is safe, it's good, it's a value, it's pro-life, pro-you. There's no sin involved. Also, to those of you who were once Catholic and are now objectivists, or Christian generally, I highly recommend Ayn Rand's essay, and you can find it in the internet. You can find it for free on ARI's website. Duty versus causality. Because I think that what happens to many people who come to objectivism from religion, any religion, but primarily Christianity, is they then approach the objectivist ethics as duties. Ayn Rand rejects duty through and through completely. She calls it an anti-concept. It is a destructive idea that undermines morality, undermines ethics. I mean, we'll have to do a show on this. So you've got to reject duty, and this is in the sense in which objectivism is not a religion. You do not act out of duty in order to live your morality. And she talks about the objectivist morality is causal. You act out of an understanding of causation. Instead of acting on duty, you act based on values that are pro-life and what causes those values, the actions that are necessary to achieve those values. Those become your virtues and values. So morality, religion tells you, thou shalt. It's your duty to do it. And by the way, the more you suffer doing it, the more virtuous it is. Because, religion fundamentally is anti-individual human life. It's not a pro-life ideology, religion. It's an anti-life ideology. But objectivism says, no, don't do it out of duty. You must discover your values. You must figure out what's good for you. Here's some philosophical ideas, but you must make them your own. And those abstractions don't give you concrete guidance in terms of what to do in your life. You have to figure that out. So, rationality, reason is a cardinal value in objectivism. Okay, what do I do with that? How do I apply it? What does that mean in terms of career, love, pursuit of anything? Well, you have to figure that out. Not subjectively, not out of emotion, but through a process of causation. If reason is a value, what causes must I affect in the world in order to achieve it? What must I do in my life in order to achieve the value of reason? Oh, if you want to be successful in your career, if that's a value, what must I do? How must I act? What should I cause in my life to achieve success at work? So you act on the basis of facts, evidence, reality, and on the basis of values that are oriented towards your life. And if you have a sense of thou shalt be, objectivism says that honesty is a virtue, and you have this thing in your head that says I shall be honest. I need to be honest. Honesty, I've got to, then you've got to understand how honesty affects your life. How honesty is just an application of rationality. How it's a means to achieving the value of reason. It's a means to achieving the value of self-esteem. It's the means to achieving the value of happiness. It's not a commandment. It's not a duty. And suffering and pain are mostly signals, with the exception of exercise, that something is not right. Something is not working. Whereas on the duty premise, pain and suffering is a sign of positive. So, yeah, I mean, when you come to objectivism from religion, there's a lot of baggage. There's a lot of baggage. And you've got to be aware of that. And I think Andrew's right in a sense that one of the baggages, or one of the ways to, realize you're in a new world now is to come to terms with the idea of the goodness, of the value of pleasure. Molten splendor. Why do so many think that a charismatic objectivist leader will help? Socialism, Fuentes, etc., all have large followings, but aren't they just reflections of the culture? In my opinion, a reflection of an individualist culture, a reflection of individualist culture is more important than a new tribe. Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I don't think a charismatic objectivist leader will help. There's no harm, it'd be great, but it's not going to make a big difference. It'll attract a few more people. It'll increase maybe readership of Ayn Rand. But this is the point. To be a follower of Fuentes, you don't have to do a lot of thinking. You don't have to do a lot of integrating. You don't have to do a lot of work on yourself. It's pure emotion. The same with socialism. I mean, it's easy to follow a leader in that respect because you just follow the leader and you follow your emotions and you get angry when it's appropriate. And objectivism requires that you think, integrate, understand. And the most a charismatic leader can do is prompt you to do that. But then you have to do the work. And there's nothing to indicate the culture, people in the culture are ready for that work. Ready to actually do the thinking, to actually do the integrating. But look, the reason they think that is because everybody wants a shortcut. We're all frustrated by the fact that we don't yet have an objectivist world. We're all frustrated by the fact that evil and bad people succeeding politically, certainly, as much as they are, and culturally as much as they are. And we want a solution, and we want a solution now, and we're not willing to wait. And if only a great charismatic leader came about, but the only way he would gain large audiences is, you're right, if those audiences became a tribe, an unthinking following tribe. What we need is cultural change. Cultural change takes a long time. It's a lot of work. People have to do the work themselves. Nobody can do it for them. No charisma can do the work for you. You have to do the work. You have to change. And it takes generations. It just does. There's no shortcuts. No shortcuts, sadly. Or not sadly. I mean, it's hard to be saddened by it's hard to be sad by the metaphysical, the very nature of reality. There's just no shortcuts. People have to do the work, and work takes time. And for people to realize they have to do the work is going to take a long time. Andrew says, I've observed something and wonder if you think it's ominous. Christian aesthetics has improved lately. Just one example, in the series, Martin Scorsese is directing, The Saints, much more compelling and even beautiful at times. What does this portend? A rise I don't know. I'd have to see the show and to see to what extent is it really Christian, right? To what extent is it really enforcing Christian values? But look, the reality is that we live in a world dominated by Christian values in many respects, certainly in the realm of ideas and in the realm of aesthetics. I mean, socialism is fundamentally Christian. Fuentes is, of course, doing it in the name of Christianity. So we are surrounded everywhere by Christian values. And did the fact that I don't know, Michelangelo sculpted the Pietà, Christian theme? You could even say the theme of the sculpture, which might be, resignation, Mary's resignation to the fate of her son. Did that make Christianity stronger? Maybe at the margin, but there's also such a strong secular aspect to it that I think it also weakens it at the same time. So it depends what people responded to. And I think they much more responded to a humanized Jesus, a strong, powerful man, a beautiful woman mourning her lover, because Mary in it is just as young as Jesus is. And there's a real secular aspect to it, even if ultimately the theme is she's resigned to the loss, right? So it depends on exactly what the art form is actually doing. Right? But look, Christianity in some respects is on the rise. More people are taking it seriously. It seems to be gaining influence politically. Generally, I think we need to be worried. And I don't know. Christian music is kind of silly. It's just a form of either rock or pop or country. You don't have a Bach. You don't have a Mozart doing a requiem. None of that exists. So even if it's Scorsese directing the Saints, it's one element that to really have pro-Christian aesthetics, you got a long way to go, particularly if you compare it to the Renaissance. And the Renaissance was a period of de-Christianization, not of intensifying Christianization. So I'm not too worried about any particular TV series, but maybe it's a broader phenomena. But all the themes of almost all the movies are altruistic and collectivistic, and in that sense, anti-civilization. And yet civilization just survives in spite of that. For how long, I don't know, but it survives. Pickaxing in Europe, on Europe. He says, finished Bernstein's A Splendid Exchange recently. Incredible. Real heroic gems, like ancient wheat being traded by up to the Euphrates for copper and lapis and lazuli, all the way to the fallacy of the Corn Laws. I was chuffed. Yeah, I mean, it's a really, really good book. I mean, there's some things later on when he gets to the 20th century and current events that I think he's compromising. But his history stuff is just amazing. And yes, the idea of trade in a very, very primitive society when they didn't even have wagons and wheels and they still managed to trade stuff, the amount of trade that was going on internationally early in human existence or early in human civilization, because this is kind of, it's just stunning. It's just amazing. And Bernstein's, it's called, A Splendid Exchange is the book by, the author's name is Bernstein. It's on Amazon. You can get audiobook, you can get it a book form or Kindle. It really, really, really is a good book. And it gives you a perspective on trade and how it's been part of human life pretty much forever, that is incredibly valuable. Shahzad, what would Ayn Rand think of Chernobyl disaster? If she lived to see it, what would she think of their current regime? Well, I don't know. I mean, look, let's be very clear. I do not channel Ayn Rand. I don't know what she would think, really. I mean, I can guess. or I can give you my. But she was an original thinker and always had perspectives and ways of approaching it. She was a genius in ways I am not. So there's just no way for me to tell you what Ayn Rand would think. But I think it's the obvious, right? She would think Chernobyl was expected and a consequence of socialism and communism. I think the way it was depicted in the miniseries Chernobyl, I think it was on HBO or something like that. Chernobyl, I think, is very much aligned with, I think, the way Ayn Rand would have imagined it happening. If you read Atlas Shrugged, it's almost like some scenes in Atlas Shrugged, like the train in the tunnel and other things. So, I think what happened there is very consistent with what she did, right? With what she believed in, what she believed, how evil functions, the way evil functions, the evasion, the not taking personal responsibility to anything. I think she saw that, she understood that, she understood that was very much in the nature of communism. In terms of what she would think of the current regime, she would again, I don't think she'd be surprised. She believed that that Russian culture was very much mystical, superstitious and mystical, and very much relied as a consequence on a powerful authoritarian leader. And I don't think she'd be surprised at Putin's authoritarianism and at the relative passivity of the Russian people. I mean, not all of them. Many of them left and many of them object. But most of them, the relative passivity of the Russian people, just like they were passive under communism, they're passive under Putin. So I don't think she'd be surprised at all that Russia became authoritarian in a different way than communism, but still essentially authoritarian with the fall of communism. Molten splendor, kindness rocks. Altruism, guilt, self-sacrifice sucks. Yes, and kindness rocks to people worthy of kindness. I mean, there's some people I would not be kind to. I'm a big believer in, some people deserve hate. Some people deserve to be treated badly. So kindness rocks to people you don't know, or to people you have, to people of whom you have no reason to think ill of. But to people who you think ill of, you shouldn't be kind. Yep. Thanks, Molten. Not Chavez algorithm. Some days, I think the Enlightenment is just too vigorous for ideas as silly and primitive as Christianity to undo it. But when I see what the Republican Party has devolved into in such a short time, it's hard to say. Yeah, I mean, it is hard to say. I have this strong sense that the Enlightenment has been weakened dramatically over the last 20 years, and we're living through times right now that are truly scary. And I mean, I've been watching some of the Turning Point USA stuff. I'll talk about it on Monday. God, and I'm on Twitter a lot, so I see a lot of these stupid heritage Americans. I mean, the barbarity, the primitiveness, of this idea of heritage Americans. My 11th grandparents, that's 11 generations earlier, came on the Mayflower. My 10th, and this founder was a founding father, and this, like, what have you done? And what does that have anything to do with you? And how many of them were slave owners? And how many of them were criminals? And how many of them did horrible things? Because if you go back 11 generations, that's a lot of grandparents. There are a lot of grandparents. That's a lot of people. Some of them were really bad. So what does it mean? Nada. And yet they take it so seriously. They're so intent on it. They're so committed to it. I mean, I couldn't imagine just a few years ago that America would become this collectivistic, this tribal, this racist. I mean, I guess I should have known better because it has a racist past, but I did not. I think that was something America powerfully had overcome, and to see it reverting back to it, unbelievable. Swisher, excellent show and presentation today. Happy holidays to you and yours. Happy holidays to you too. Merry Christmas, Happy New Year, and all the rest. Lori, please talk about the process, challenges in writing your book, and how you overcome them, Oh, the process challenges. I'm not sure what process challenges are. By the way, we just signed a deal with an agent. I'm excited. I don't know. I think most of the challenges are intellectual. Most of the challenges are intellectual. And Sunday, I don't think there's really, I mean, Don is a good writer. I'm a good editor. We both can hash out these things. So process is, I think, pretty down. You'd have to ask Don if he feels differently. I think the main thing is that the intellectual stuff is hard. So how do you conceptualize Christianity, for example? Like, there are a million different types of Christianity, right? Every little Protestant sect has a different interpretation. What's the essence? What are the essentials of Christianity? And how do you do it in a way that doesn't come off dismissive of all the different Christian variations? But even Jesus, there are like multiple interpretations of Jesus. Jordan Peterson has an interpretation of Sermon on the Mount, which is different than I think Pope X's and Pope Y's and Pope Z's. They all have different ones. So what is the essence? What are you criticizing in Christianity? Right? So you have to do that. And again, you have to do it, unless you're just writing for an objectivist audience, you have to do it in a credible way that a Christian audience, or mildly Christian audience, because I don't think we'll convince anybody who's thoroughly Christian, but a mildly Christian audience, so somebody raised in Christianity, would recognize it. And then how do you untangle the fact that in the same geographic area at the same time, you have these opposite forces functioning? You have Christianity functioning, and you have, call it Greek ideas, Aristotelian ideas functioning. And Christianity, at least nominally, seems to embrace some of the Greek ideas. So to what extent does it embrace Greek ideas because of the nature of Christianity? And to what extent is it embracing Greek ideas in spite of its nature of Christianity? And I think it's in spite of Christianity. But how do you show that? You know, because a lot of Christians will say, see, we embraced Aristotle. We brought reason into the West. And it's like you did that in spite of being Christian, not because you were Christian. Christianity fought against it. Or Christianity core ideas fought against it. So all of that untangling, that's the most complex. I think the layout of it, the sequence historically of, you know, the introduction of Greek Aristotelian ideas, the decline of Greek ideas in early Christianity and the going into the Dark Ages and the rediscovery of Greek ideas in the late Middle Ages or the early Middle Ages, and then more so in the late Middle Ages, that leads to the Renaissance, leads to the Enlightenment, leads to the modern world. That I think we have, right? That I think is, Ayn Rand lays it out, and I think we have a deep understanding of that. But even there, what is important, what is not important, you know, is complicated. But I think it's untangling. How do you separate that from the story of Christianity? I mean, a lot of people claim that Christianity is responsible for our conception of the individual. But you know, I don't think that's even true. I think there's that conception of the individual, the conception of I, a conception of an individual mind already exists in Greece. So I don't think that was invented by Christianity. So there are a lot of things that people throw at you as the different virtues of Christianity, dignity, I don't know, the equality of man. And yet Christianity abided by slavery for a very long time. But then the many of the leading abolitionists were Christian. So how do you do that? I mean, all the Southern slave owners were Christian and used Christianity to justify slavery. But then all the abolitionists, or a significant number of the abolitionists, were like Quakers and I mean committed Christians, not just marginally Christians. So how do you explain that? So that's the complication. It's an intellectual issue of figuring out what's essential and what's not, and how to untangle it all, right? All right, Andrew, do you agree that with this as a general point regarding pity, an emotionally connected person allows himself to access all emotions, including pity, but Christianity says to maximize it, pity is an intense emotion, don't play with it. Well, I don't know what playing with an emotion is, but, what does pity mean, right? I mean, to feel sorry for somebody. I mean, if you're rational, you only feel sorry for somebody when they deserve that feeling. That is, now, because you have baggage, you might feel it when it's undeserving, when you shouldn't feel it, in a sense. But you feel it. So what objectivism teaches you is your emotions are what they are. You feel them. You recognize them. And then you evaluate whether they deserve taking action or not, based on. Christianity says it's pity is a essential emotion on which you should always take action. It's an essential emotion that should guide you in life. You should pity the poor. You should pity the weak. But I don't pity the poor. I pity some poor. I don't have the emotion of pity towards the poor. I have an emotion of pity towards the unjustly poor. But if I see the example I always use. If I see a wife-beating drunk who's poor, I don't pity them. I mean, if anything, it's a sense of justice. They're poor because they deserve to be poor. So there's a deserving poor and there's an undeserving poor. And to the extent that you're going to respond emotionally, it's you should be responding emotionally in a sense of, I guess, pity is you're feeling sorry for them. You feel for them. You have empathy for them in some sense. You only want to do that for people who don't deserve to be poor. So Christianity doesn't discriminate. I don't pity my enemy. So while you take your emotions as they are, you also should evaluate them in a sense of, do they come from the right place? Do they come from the place of love, or from a place, to use Jim Roney, I guess, terminology, or from the place of fear? Andrew, the impassioned part of Rand's answer on how we can teach our children not to be ashamed of success, do not teach them to be humble. Yes. Yeah, take credit for your work. Take credit for your success. Again, it doesn't mean to be boastful. It doesn't mean to lord over others over your success, because it's not about other people. It's about you. I succeeded. I did it. I built it. I created it. It's exactly the opposite of what's his name, Obama's, you didn't build that. You should be humble. You didn't build it. No, I did build it. NM, if a Christian today is being overall good and rational, why do I need to pick a fight by telling them, those aren't your Christian values? If a Christian today is being overall good and rational, why do I need to tell them? Well, because they might not be tomorrow. That is, tomorrow they might hear a different sermon and interpret those values differently and become more Christian and therefore become worse. And as long as you're Christian and you hold faith, there's only so much happiness you can attain. There's a cap on your ability to be rational and therefore successful and therefore happy. So you're doing them a favor by telling them, here's the real nature of the values you're pursuing, and you should be more consistent about it. It's good for their life. And secondly, you want to arm them not to be captured in the name of Christianity by the values that would do you harm and all of us harm. So truth is a good thing. Reality is a good thing. Knowing what people really, people knowing themselves is a good thing. Liam says, will you be on the panel with Stephen Pika this OCON? I don't know. I assume not because I haven't heard, but I just don't know. I don't know who's going to be on, and I have not heard anything one way or the other, so I assume the answer is no because I assume they've already planned it. But, I don't know. I'm not involved in the planning of it. Hopper Campbell, thoughts on retiring in Santa Barbara, California versus Orange County? God, I don't know. Santa Barbara strikes as more expensive than Orange County. Orange County has a lot more variety in terms of housing and places to live. Santa Barbara is smaller and probably more expensive. Santa Barbara is more beautiful particularly if you can get something on the hills overlooking the ocean. It's gorgeous. It really is amazing. Orange County, to get a house that overlooks the ocean, is very expensive, but it's probably very expensive in Santa Barbara. I get a sense that Orange County has more stuff to do, but I'm not sure. I don't know Santa Barbara that much. It has a symphony. It has opera coming there once in a while. LA is not that far, particularly if you can drive off rush hours. You can get to LA in less than an hour sometimes. And then there's all the benefits of LA. There's probably a lot more restaurants in Orange County, particularly given that you can get to LA. But look, weather in both places is great. Ocean is right there. Views are great. Expensive places to live, but yeah, wonderful in many regards, many respects. And you have to tolerate California. James, 100 years from now, will ARI be bigger than the church? My powers of prophecy are very limited. Powers of prophecy are very limited. So I don't know. I hope so. And there's a chance. I don't know how to put a probability on it. 100 years is a long time. But there certainly is a chance we will be. Andrew, materially, the year 2025 standard of living in America, like living in heaven on earth, the civilized world wasn't built for the sake of teaching heaven, but for the betterment of man on earth. I'm not sure what you're getting at, Andrew, but I'll just say, it's nobody's satisfied, and nobody should be. The point is, more. We're greedy. Human beings, rational human beings are greedy. Healthy human beings, put it this way, healthy human beings are greedy. If greed means you want more. And we want more. We want flying cars, for God's sake. We want materially more. We want spiritually. We want more. We want more success. We want more prosperity. We want more fun. We want more pleasure. We want more. So 2025 was like living in an amazing world materially, and it could be much better, and we should strive for that. Yeah, I don't think it was well worded because I didn't quite understand it. Robert, every year, every one of these values is reimagined by the better among contemporary American Christians, I know. Faith is risk tolerance, humility is knowing your limitations and avoiding second-handedness and fake pride. Love is benevolence and embracing values, which makes discussing the underlying contradiction within these issues challenging at best. Yeah, but when you push them, the altruism comes out. At the end of the day, they believe in a God, and God has certain things that they must do. At the end of the day, it affects their epistemology, and it certainly affects their ethics and their ability to experience pride, their ability to gain self-esteem, their ability to be, even more ambitious than they are. So yes, I think it's hard, but a lot of that is rationalization. And what you need to do is ask them questions that help kind of reveal what is being rationalized and what is behind it all, and the fact that no, they accept these definitions. They know they're anti-life at some level, and they don't want to live that life. So they've redefined them. They've put them to the side, but they haven't completely given up on them, because otherwise they'd have to give up on being Christian. God is still there, and altruism is still there. That undermines them, and that's what you need to help them see. Molten Splendor says, I'm sorry I missed your missing link talk, but I did enjoy listening to it later. Please do more of these. I intend to. Thanks, Molten Splendor. I intend to. I like numbers. When did Europe become civilized? I think during the Enlightenment. I think in the mid-1600s. You can't. Suddenly, the 30-Year War was not a civilized thing. Suddenly, the Inquisition was not civilized. So I'd say post-30-Year War, early 1700s, late 1600s, somewhere around that. The Enlightenment, basically. That's when it becomes civilized. It becomes more peaceful. Of course, it becomes much more peaceful in the 19th century. Rulers are viewed with a lot more suspicion. In Britain, you get a much more assertive parliament and a significant reduction in the power of the king. And there's a certain tendency around Europe for a little bit of that, although not in France. They have to go through a revolution to get that. But it certainly it's becoming civilized intellectually, scientifically, peace-wise, and politically. And of course, you could say it's civilized in 1776. Now, that doesn't mean bad things don't continue to happen. Slavery, for example. But it's on a path. Starting in the late 17th century, it's on a path for progress, for progress materially and progress spiritually and progress politically. So America is the consequence of that. J.J. Jigbee, your thoughts on the film A Man of All Four Seasons? I rewatched it recently and thought it was great. I tried to imagine how you would interpret it. Yeah, I mean, I love that movie. It's a really great movie. It's a movie about integrity. Now, integrity to false values, but still integrity, and the evil of kind of an authoritarian king, a whim-worshipping authoritarian king, and a man standing on principle. So it's a story of Thomas More and King Henry VIII. And and it's really well acted and really well directed, and the dialogue is excellent. Yeah, I mean, I really like that movie. I haven't seen it in a long time, but I remember it's up there. It's up there in my movie lists. Andrew, does integrity to self-sacrifice suicide? Is that, in that sense, do the monks who set themselves on fire for a social cause achieve the utmost moral good? Well, I mean, by their sick morality, yeah, but that's not morality. So they don't. They achieve their moral good. But some people would argue that by dying, it doesn't allow them to help more poor people. So probably not, right? So the ideal is suffering through life while wanting to commit suicide, and helping other people while hating helping them. That's the ideal. That's utmost moral good. The utmost moral good is staying alive in spite of the pain, the suffering that you experience in order to help other people. And to eat and take care of yourself just enough so that you can keep staying alive so you can help other people. That's the ultimate good. That's why Mother Teresa is a saint. Robert, the splitting long question with multiple super chats like I just did is definitely cheating. You're very charitable for not criticizing it. Why would I criticize it? It was completely legit. I mean, if you'd done it in one question as a $20 question, I would have answered it earlier, sooner. So if anything, it was hurting you. No, it wasn't cheating. Who suffered from the cheat? Who did it cheat at the expense of? All right, Jeff. If we support freedom of speech and separation of church and state, how do we achieve the removal of religion from government and schools without silencing them? Well, you don't remove it in the sense of that the president is religious. The president can be religious. What it means to remove it from government is that it should not affect legislation, that it should not affect governing. And there's a sense in which that's almost impossible if particularly in a democracy where people can vote anything, in the sense that people are influenced by their values, and if their values are Christian, they're going to vote Christianity. But a court could say the reasoning for this law is fundamentally religious, and therefore we strike it as unconstitutional. Now, you can silence people in the context of schools and in the context of lots of things, right? I can silence you on my chat. So if you perceive government schools as, at least in their functioning, pseudo private property, the private property of, I don't know, the parents or whatever, of the school board, then the school board gets to determine the curriculum. They get to decide who to platform and who not to platform. It's absolutely not the responsibility of a school board to maximize speech, to allow for all perspectives to be presented. No, they have to make a decision about, in the name of educating the kids, what should be and shouldn't be presented. Now, ideally, there are no public schools, there are no government schools. And then private schools get to decide what should and shouldn't be in the curriculum. Free speech is not a contradiction to deplatforming, as long as the deplatforming happens in the context of private interaction. Like numbers, was Rourke wrong to pity Keating? Look, there's a sense in which the whole relationship between Keating and Rourke doesn't really make sense to me. Like, Rourke keeps helping Keating. To what end? He's being benevolent, but sometimes there's a friendship there that doesn't quite make sense. So the only reason I think that Rourke would pity Keating is that he sees something in Keating that I don't see, that is a source of their friendship, that is a real value, and he pities him because he can see his potential if he'd taken a different route. If he had not made or committed the errors, or it's not errors, the evasions that he did when he was young. Right? But I don't pity Keating. I think he gets exactly what he deserves. Jason, in the 2000s, Peikoff on his podcast pointed out how concerning and unsettling the mere notion of motorcycle bikers have their own Christian ministries was. Now it's normal in my town and on TV. Yeah, and it's everywhere, and there are many ministries everywhere. It's these, Christianity catering to every little group, every little tribe that comes about. They develop their own theology for them. All right, we are only $13 short of our goal. Let's try to make it. We've got 10 minutes. 10 minutes is a hard stop anyway. So let somebody come in with $13 question, and so we can. There we go. That's 10. Andrew just did 10, so we just need 3 now. FJ Feng, I've just realized I don't like my parents or have anything in common with them. I'm struggling with this. Yeah, I mean, it's normal to struggle with it. the question is, do you have any feelings towards them because they raised you, because they gave you life? Is that a value to you, the fact that they raised you and gave you life? Did they raise you well? And so to what extent is that a positive that you want to recognize and accept and therefore, give them a certain minimal level of respect and appreciation for that? But if you don't like your parents and you don't have anything in common with them, then you should adjust your relationship accordingly. I mean, you don't hang out with them a lot. Don't spend a lot of time with them. Whatever it is your valuation of your parent is and your emotion and your commitment to them, figure out what that is and adjust your interaction with them to that. So if you appreciate them because they raised you okay and you appreciate the fact that they gave you life, but it's not that you dislike them, it's not that you hate them, but you just don't have anything in common with them. You don't like them that much. They're not your kind of people. Then minimize your interaction with them. Don't cut them off completely because you still have that basic appreciation for them. But if you don't, then cut them off completely. That is, I'm not against that. But in other words, adjust your relationship with your parents to the extent to which they are valued to you. And don't feel that you have to do more than that because they're your parents and you should honor your father and your mother. So says the Bible. Andrew, I think you should use this show to organize your material for the book. It was really well structured and impactful. Thank you. Lincoln, I mean, I'm doing that in a sense because this really helps me think through some of these issues. And then I go back to the book and verbalizing it really makes it clarifies it to me. Don listens to it. I think it helps clarify to him, at least it clarifies what I'm thinking to him, and then we can have a discussion about it. Lincoln, why is Christianity more common in America than Europe, even though the U.S. was founded by large secular Enlightenment thinkers? I think because it wasn't a state religion, it was allowed to morph and into all kinds of sects and all kinds of interpretations, and develop in a way that made it consistent with America as it emerged in the 19th century. So the conflict between modernity and Christianity didn't become as evident because it kind of Christianity kind of absorbed America or incorporated America into its theology. This is the point that Robert was making earlier. Most Americans, their theology is American. I tell them often that they love Jefferson more than Jesus, and they love the Constitution more than the Bible. So they made it part of it. I think that also there were no really leading intellectuals in America who were kind of really secular and pushed the secular agenda until kind of the pragmatists. Whereas in Europe, I think there was a real secularization among the intellectuals very early on. There was kind of a diminishing of religion to some extent, or secularization of religion. And of course, there was this massive secularization of religion that was done by Marx, basically secularizing religion into his view of communism. There were other things. I mean, Europe really secularized after the First World War. First World War was such a horrific event for them. It was so disorienting. The idea that it could be a god and the First World War happened was just beyond them. It was similar to the 30-Year War, which led to the Enlightenment. I think the First World War led to secularism, but also to cynicism. But it's a good question. I don't have a full answer to it. It would require real analysis. Lincoln says, how can a career in the military be self-interested? I like the idea of being in the military part-time by the National Guard, but it feels a bit, and I don't have the second part of the question. But let me just answer that look, you can. It feels a bit the military at the current administration is against my values. Yes, I mean, I think you really have to be questioning about whether to join the military under the conditions of this administration or any other administration, because they're all against your values. In this modern world, and what are you fighting for? It's not clear. So I think it's a much more difficult decision today to join the military than it would have been in the past, because of the nature of the country, the people, and our politicians, our leaders, and including, by the way, the generals and what they will tell you to do or not do, and which I think really damaging. But to make a career of it in a rational world, I don't see a big issue there. I mean, it's a challenging position. It requires a lot of thinking. It requires action. It requires strategy. It's a challenging, interesting profession. How to defend militarily. How to use the military to defend values. Andrew, my manager gave me a good advice regarding a person who reports to me who's objectively not doing her work, and I was defending her. He said, you're not her savior, Andrew. That is very good advice. Yes. You can't save people. It's not your job as a manager to save people. Your job is to objectively evaluate them and give them that objective feedback and treat them with justice, which means, positively if they're doing a good job and negatively if they're doing a bad job. Lincoln says, thoughts on LDS Mormon Church? I don't have a lot. I don't know that much about them. I mean, it's a crazy story if you listen to the story of how the church came about. Anybody who believes that has to be a little cuckoo, but that's true of all religion. They just are modern people believing in that is just bizarre. Modern people coming up with that theology is bizarre. But generally, if you interact with Mormons, they're hardworking, they're honest, they're quite productive, they're nice people. They seem quite friendly. I mean, they seem pretty normal in spite of the kooky theology. And the question is, my guess is most of them just don't take that theology very seriously. They very quickly abandoned polygamy when it became politically inconvenient for them. So they obviously don't take theology that seriously, right? I mean, polygamy was part of their theology, and then they were told in order to become a state, you would have to embrace monogamy, and they did in order to become a state. So they rewrote the rules, just like Christians do all the time. The Mormons I've interacted with have mostly been positive people. But I also know a lot of people who left the church. Actually, there's a number who become objectivists. And they have a much more negative view of the church, right? Because they've lived it. So I'm sure that if you live it, it's not pleasant at all. And if your parents take it seriously, to the extent that it's taken seriously, it's not pleasant at all. The extent that it's taken seriously, it's bad, just like all religion. All right, guys, have a great rest of your weekend. I will see you on Monday. My schedule got a little screwed up, but anyway, we don't have an interview on Monday, so we'll just have a show on Monday. The Nikos interview is a week later. I will see you then. Thanks to all the super chatters. We made our goal, just squeaked in perfectly. Thank you, and have a great weekend. Bye.